I did for the U of Minnesota, they have, so like,
First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ellie Garrity, and I'm the manager of alumni career programs with the Alumni Association. We're really excited that you're able to join us for today's Terp Talk, Remotely Well, the 5 Essential Elements of Quarantine Well-Being with alumnus Chad Ellsworth. This webinar is part of the Alumni Association's Professional Development Webinar Series, in which we hope to provide thought-provoking and valuable content that will help alumni like you achieve your personal and professional goals. Please keep a close eye out on our upcoming webinar series as we
I
look
sent
to
it to me.
provide relevant content during the COVID-19 outbreak to help you continue to be successful
Are
at
you still
work
working?
and at home. And just a quick reminder for those of you just tuning in, make sure you have your mute button on so we can continue to keep things clear here.
So the ants.
And so we have a lot of information to cover today, but we want you to get the most out of this webinar. So be sure to chat in your questions when you have them, and Chad would be happy to answer them. Now, a little bit about Chad. Chad Ellsworth is an author, professional keynote speaker, career, leadership, and life coach. In 2018, he published Building Up Without Tearing Down: How to Cultivate Heroic Leadership in You and Your Organization. Chad served at the University of Minnesota community for more than 15 years as a career coach, and now he's serving at Carleton College as a program director for employer relations. He lives in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area with his wife, Kristen, and 2 sons, Joey and Paul. I'll hand it over to Chad to share a little bit more about his experience and to get things started. Go ahead, Chad.
yeah, thank you, Ellie. Really excited to be giving this webinar here today. It's really amazing to reconnect with the Terp family. I'm glad Ellie mentioned Joey and Paul in the bio. They are, like most people, doing school from home. And so you may see them pop into the background every once in a while. And I don't always see them. So you see them, they'll probably wave. And Paul, especially my youngest, really likes to kind of ham it up for the camera. So, but yeah, as Ellie mentioned, I work at Carleton College. I worked at the University of Minnesota. That was actually my first job after leaving Maryland, where I went for graduate school. So, let's see, 2002 to 2004 would have been my time at the University of Maryland. Since that time, I've really just fallen in love, especially with Gallup's strengths-based psychology and their approach. And I really try to consume absolutely everything that I possibly can in terms of that information. Quarantine life has taken me away from Maryland. It took a visit away from me. And so I'm eagerly looking forward to going back to campus as soon as we are on the other side of all this. But my family and I had planned to do the first plane ride for my kids. They're 12 and they're 8, and visit Maryland and visit the DC area. And so we're going to reschedule that as soon as we're all the way through this. So definitely happy to reconnect virtually with my Maryland family and the alumni community there. So a little bit about where we're going to go today. I love little acronyms, so please indulge me. I've got a really bad Midwestern sense of humor. So our aim for today is to take a look at our new reality. So most of us have been in this kind of quarantine situation for about a month, give or take. But it's still something that I think in a lot of ways, at least speaking for myself, there are still things I'm learning about myself and how to go about, kind of my day-to-day life and certainly my work in this new environment. We're also going to take a look at almost 90 years of research on well-being. So this isn't just kind of this new fad that Gallup has, kind of started studying, but it is truly something that's been around for a long time. It has really been one of the core areas of their research. And lastly, most importantly, I want all y'all to leave with an anchor amidst the chaos. I think about all the uncertainty and all the unknowns and all the things that are just kind of swirling around us, that storm that's just making its way around us. I really want to try to help you create for yourself that anchor in terms of your own well-being. So Ellie mentioned a little bit about who I am. You'll see the cover of my book there on the right-hand side, Building Up Without Tearing Down. A lot of ways that was a culmination of a journey and certainly the research that I did in graduate school at Maryland. And so I've was very proud to finally tell that story and to share that journey. And you'll see the wonderful red and white there. Certainly two of my favorite colors for a lot of reasons, not the least of which, of course, being Maryland. A little bit about me, you'll see a list of kind of the positions I held at the University of Minnesota. I was literally all over the campus. If you're not familiar with the campus, it's about 50,000 students. It's spread across three locations, sort of, just because of the river and the Minneapolis-St. Paul divide. So I actually worked on the St. Paul campus, the Minneapolis East Bank campus, and the Minneapolis West Bank campus. And I worked in a variety of different roles. I've also held a leadership role. I was president of the board of directors for a nonprofit, hazingprevention.org. Been Cub Master for my kids' groups. So I love just this kind of organizational development is really an area that I really fell in love with and find a lot of joy in. So that's a little bit about me, and I would love to know a little bit about you. But most of all, I want to know, how are you feeling today? So as you sit here, it's 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock East Coast. That put us about noon on the West Coast. How are you feeling? How are you doing? So if that's one word or a short sentence, I'm curious if you could just share in the chat box. How are you doing right now in this moment? Thank you, Jose. Feeling nervous, tired, fine, super scared, exhausted, less motivation, a little burned out, good, anxious. So appreciate all of y'all that are, kind of sharing and being open and vulnerable there. Optimistic, that's awesome. But appreciate you sharing kind of where you're at. And I think a lot of us are feeling not only different emotions at any given time, but all the time. And you might find that you're really kind of vacillating between these different feelings and emotions, depending on what's going on, and really feeling some extremes, even in some cases where things seem to be going really well. And then we feel just overwhelmed by everything that we're dealing with in this moment. I think as we were coming into the situation, and certainly as I was coming into the situation, it started out with these really cute memes in terms of, oh, my pets are my coworkers, and I've got this new uniform that I'm wearing in terms of, my sweats on the bottom and something really professional on the top. Sleeping in, having this more flexible work schedule, and it was kind of a little bit of that dry humor. But I think as I've, kind of entered the second month, so to speak, I think we're exactly 4 weeks and a couple of days in from when Minnesota went to stay at home. It certainly is feeling very real. And I think it does feel like a little bit of a grind. And so I really want to just acknowledge that space that we are all kind of in together. With all that said, this is not an entirely new phenomenon. I mean, at this scale, it absolutely is new and different for all of us. But there have been people working fully remote from home, and in Gallup's State of the American Workplace, which is based on 31 million respondents, 43% pre-coronavirus, pre-COVID-19, were working some or all the time remotely. And the reason that I point this out is that means that there are some things that we can learn just by looking into the somewhat recent past, before we came into this situation. When we look at, this comes from Buffer, which is kind of social media sharing application, in terms of their study of remote workers, you can see that people that were working, in this case, 100% time from home, they were, really struggling with collaboration, communication. They were struggling with loneliness, not being able to unplug, the distractions that they would have at home, just the difference in time zones with some of their teammates, staying motivated. And I think, looking back at the responses from the chat when we started, you'll see a lot of those same common themes in terms of what we're experiencing emotionally, and some levels physically, and that these are, physiological responses in our bodies. And it's not just this, kind of way that we're feeling, but there are very real physiological things happening with us that cause these types of feelings. Again, another little cute meme from early in the social distancing era, but the Where's Waldo social distancing edition. But I wanted to share John Clifton, who's actually the global managing partner at Gallup, posted this, as you'll see, on March 23rd. So this was some time ago, but I think this really shows how long we have all been kind of in this space. So 79% were avoiding going to events with large crowds, 75% were avoiding traveling by airplane, bus, subway, and train. Over half of us canceled or postponed travel plans. I was certainly one of those, as I shared at the outset. Avoiding going to public spaces such as stores and restaurants. Half are stocking up on food, medical supplies, cleaning supplies. So overwhelmingly, so many of us have been really dealing with this situation for a while and are still adjusting. And that is really completely normal. But I think it's had this really profound impact, and we need to just honor that and respect the level of that impact. And now to start to look at this idea of well-being from a broader research perspective, as of the beginning of April, so April 5th, as you'll see on the slide, Gallup has been tracking, well-being longer than this, but going back to kind of 2008 being that major pivotal point in the Great Recession that we all experienced some 12 years ago. You could see that overall we were, largely on this uptick, but even at its highest point, looking back to about the beginning of 2018 is probably the highest point on that chart, probably in the 56% range. 56% of the US adult population was thriving. And so that's just barely over half. And so we certainly are experiencing, as you can see, just in the beginning of April, we're already down to 48.8%. But overall, how do we hold on to as much of this well-being as we can, knowing that there's so much that's out of our control? How do we create an intentional path and plan and routine that can really help us hold on to as much of that well-being as possible, to really be proactive for our own kind of sense of self in this situation? I also want to point out that a lot of the folks that have these backgrounds in psychology and counseling are really anticipating this unprecedented level of emotional trauma and PTSD. And those are very real and very valid. And so some strategies around well-being will not completely take those away. And so I don't want this to seem like, a bandage on a gaping wound. There are some times that all of us are going to need to really address the level of trauma and PTSD that might come from this. Certainly, if you're talking about losing a loved one, losing a job, any of those really kind of dramatic and traumatic experiences. So, with that said, I want to give you this kind of path and this scaffolding that you can really put into place. And I really wanted this to be a give and take. So, I have this kind of scaffolding and this structure that you can find yourselves within. But I'm going to ask all y'all to share in the group chat what kinds of things you might be doing and have found that work for you, because all the different brains that are on this Zoom call today are more powerful than just mine alone. So the more brains that we can get on finding these solutions and generating ideas, I think the better solutions we'll all have. So when I talk about this kind of scaffolding, this comes out of Gallup's work around well-being. And as you'll see, this really begins with Dr. George Gallup's research in the 1930s, which culminated in a 1960 publication, The Secret of a Long Life. Began in 2005, this really went global. And so looking at 150 countries, represent 98% of the world's population, that's when the horsepower of this study really came into place. And you'll see the little kind of binding of the book Wellbeing from Tom Rath and Jim Harter. Jim Harter is actually Gallup's chief scientist. So that is their best publication to date, other than, kind of the ongoing stuff that's on their website, in terms of well-being and understanding what that looks like. So I've taken the concepts in that book and really distilled them down into some core pieces so that this becomes really actionable that you can be able to implement in your life. And you'll see on the left side of the screen the 5 dimensions, and we're going to spend time in each of those different 5 dimensions of purpose well-being, social well-being, financial well-being, community well-being, and physical well-being. So the first one, the idea of purpose, well-being. So this really just comes down to, looking forward to doing something every day. And it's really encapsulated by the question, do you have the chance to do what you do best every single day? So as it says on the slide, this is based on research of full-time or part-time workers, retirees, stay-at-home parents, everybody in kind of every conceivable phase, stage, situation in life. And because we spend more time at doing what might be called work, whether that's formal full-time work or something that you just enjoy doing, that's something that you look forward to every day, we spend more of our time in our life doing that than anything else other than sleeping. And so this really is kind of the core foundation of well-being. So how can you really create a plan and a routine to create this for yourself? So how do you look forward, or what do you look forward to doing every day? What are some things that fit your interests? So what are ways that you can grow your abilities and those things that just are naturally interesting and intriguing to you? And what are some ways that you can then turn around and give those things to people outside of yourself? So you'll see in parentheses the words grow and give, and actually comes from Richard Leider, who works at the University of Minnesota Center for Spirituality and Healing. And he's one of, kind of the world's great experts on purpose and well-being. And he really boils it down to, and had a wonderful article in the Star Tribune about a week or two ago, where he talked about these concepts of growing and giving. So I want to, kind of challenge you, and you'll see the link there to the Star Tribune article, but how can you intentionally grow yourself, and how can you intentionally give of that great stuff that you have inside of you? So I appreciate that folks are already dropping some notes in terms of how to do this. So this is kind of the what. And then I want to ask you to think about the how. And I see that, Janet talks about, really keeping that schedule, that routine, and that is a wonderful way of going about this. The more that we can get into these really good habits, it really sets us up to really, thrive despite, kind of the chaos rolling around, as I said before. Hannah talked about journaling. Again, routine came up again. That's amazing. Keeping your workspace separate and having a separate relaxation space. And it's almost as if you read my notes. Hannah, one of the things that I've been really trying to do intentionally, and certainly not perfect, and falling into really bad habits here too myself, but really keeping my work in a place and still going to work. And so for me, I have this little corner in my family room in the basement. You might actually hear my kids off to my right over there, because that's where they tend to hang out. But I try to do all my work here. I don't take my laptop into the bedroom or the living room. I try to really keep that space. And I also have created this routine around coming to work. And so, my commute looks really different. Carleton College is about 45 minutes away from St. Paul, where I live. And I had that really nice commute that was really, kind of a routine and ritual for me. I'd listen to an audiobook on the way to and from work. I'd usually have my coffee there with me in the car. It was a pretty smooth drive, so I really just got to kind of zone out and enjoy that. But that was part of that routine. Well, I went from this 45-minute routine to a 45-second commute, and thinking about how I can really start my day in the same way to get my mind kind of into that same place. So one of the things that my supervisor actually does is he sends out a song of the day at 8 a.m. So at 8 a.m., and RJ Holmes Leopold is also a Maryland alum. So special shout out to him, but he does the song of the day, and that's a great way to start the day and really kind of get into this routine. So yeah, I see Anne mentions some exercise, which is a really great way of kind of combining the purpose well-being with the physical well-being, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Um, so yeah, lots of really great ideas. So I'm really happy to see all the suggestions coming in through the chat. The second dimension is social well-being. And so the what of this, so in terms of what makes a difference, according to Gallup's data and research, is investing in relationships that help you achieve. So people that help you get things done, people that help you enjoy life, and people that help you be healthy. And so those are kind of the three kind of main ways that our social relationships help us be better people, just to make that even more specific. So how do the people in our life help us achieve, enjoy life, and ultimately be healthy? So this is about having deliberate positive relationships. So certainly if you have people in your life that, might be negative or just might drain your energy, especially when we're going through something as, dramatic and traumatic as this coronavirus, pandemic. It's really important to keep that positive energy flowing in, because that's what ultimately keeps us afloat in this. Certainly people that accept you for who you are. It's really hard if you're surrounding yourself with people who don't really accept you as you are, and certainly treat you with respect. So those are absolute, just bare minimum kind of things. So as you think about how warm and fuzzy this feels, I want to make this a little bit more tangible. So I want you to think about $10,000 in your hand right now. So as you're sitting watching this webinar, you put your hands out in front of you, and bam, 10,000 bucks lands right there in your palm. Think about how happy that would make you feel. So according to a 30-year study by Harvard University, an increase in 10,000 bucks in your annual income is associated with just a 2% increase in your likelihood of being happy. So think about how great that feeling of 10,000 bucks was, and that correlates to just a 2% increased likelihood of being happy. Now here's where this gets fun. I wanted to calibrate that for you all. Your odds of being happy increase by 15%. So 7 something times greater than that 10,000 bucks. So 2% for 10,000, 15% if a direct connection of yours, so a close friend, is happy. That's pretty amazing. So when you think about how great 10,000 bucks would be, your odds of being happy increase by 15%, 7 times, more than 7 times as much if one of your close friends is happy. Now, your odds of being happy increase by 10% if a friend of a friend is happy, even if you don't know that person. So there really is this true contagiousness, no pun intended, of happy people in your life. The more that you have these people in your life that are happy and really bring out the best in you, the greater the likelihood of being happy. And so our friendships, our close social connections really become almost a vaccine and inoculation. I'm really sorry for using these analogies. It's not intentional, but they really do kind of protect us against some of the negative stuff that swirls around us. And the goal is to get at least 6 hours of daily social time. And you, of course, are probably asking, well, how in the world do I do that at this point in time, given that we're, certainly in Minnesota, we're stay at home and we're keeping our social distance. So recognize and just acknowledge this is a very extraordinary time. This is out of the ordinary 100%. So we have to be creative. We have to be intentional. How can we purposely take this situation and find new, innovative, and intentional ways to create those connections? Certainly working, 40 hours a week at an office, you just naturally have those interactions with people. And now if you're just working on your stuff, there's nobody stopping by and just knocking gently on your door. Those connections are fewer and far between. So you have to be more intentional with them. So this is where I would love, the brainstorming of the group. What are some ideas that you've done, that you've seen of people that have, started to create these intentional and creative social outlets? Certainly be persistent. I know everybody is busy and has a lot on their plates right now. And so recognize that sometimes it's going to take a few tries, just to be able to really execute this and to really feel like you're getting what you need. So I'm seeing a lot of folks. Deborah, I love that you're phoning friends. I've realized how hard it is to be on Zoom for about 8 hours straight during the workday. And so the good old fashioned, so to speak, phone calls are amazing. I love when I get to just sit back and I kick my feet up on my desk and, have those great conversations with people, but I can also take my eyeballs off the screen. So lots of Zoom lunch gatherings, virtual bingo. Tina, I'd love to hear more about the virtual bingo. I'm always looking for new ideas. So any additional detail you want to put in the chat box, that would be amazing. And I would appreciate it. The other piece I want to touch on this slide is that diversification of your friendship portfolio. So people always say during, hard economic times, it's really important to diversify your portfolio monetarily. In this case, I want you to think about how you can diversify your friendship portfolio. So realize that, going back to the previous slide, wanting people that help you achieve, that help you enjoy life, and people that help you kind of be well physically. Think about different people for each of those roles, and even different people within each of those roles. So you might have 3 different people that help you get things done, and 5 different people that really help you enjoy life, and 3 other people that help you be healthy, or even 1 person. So how can you diversify that and kind of go to different people for different things? So, for example, my brother lives down in Nebraska, where I'm from originally. We reached out to him about leading our family through Dungeons and Dragons, being our dungeon master. So my kids are 8 and 12, and they're at the age where they've been, kind of expressing some interest in doing something like that. So reached out to my brother, and um, because he played a lot when we were growing up, and asked him if he would serve as the dungeon master. So that's something every weekend that we do now for an hour. We just get together with Uncle Troy and do some Dungeons and Dragons. And then, we have different folks in our life that we reach out to for maybe some of our spiritual conversations, connecting with our faith community. So just think about how you can reach out to those different people and really diversify that friendship portfolio. And really the benefit of that is that, we all kind of go through ups and downs. And if you've got that, one really close person that you go to for everything, if they're going through one of those down periods, it's harder to, know that you've got other outlets then to kind of pick you back up, because they might be taken away for a little while in terms of they need to attend to something in their own life. So just by diversifying that friendship portfolio, it's a really great way of knowing that, if this person's not here today, I can go to another person and get that social connection I'm looking for.
Hey, Chad, this is Ellie
Yes.
jumping in here. Just a quick question for you, and I think you spoke to this a little bit, but um, the Zoom happy hours and the Zoom connections after working potentially, an 8-hour day looking at the computer. How do you think some of our listeners can break that day up and continue to have the virtual happy hours or the virtual game nights, while not, straining their eyes or staring at a computer for too long?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of it is recognizing and bringing light to that. And so I certainly don't know everybody's work situations, but I know I've started to advocate a little bit for breaks in between my meetings. I had this come up just the other day. I had a block from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock that I was completely booked back to back on Zoom meetings. And so I reached out to the person that had scheduled that and said, "Hey, I don't know what everybody else's calendars look like, but is there any way we can move this to the next day? Because that was on a Wednesday and my Thursday was much more open. And so if other folks are able to meet on Thursday, um, and I think even just bringing it up and talking about it, because we need to start normalizing that. I think this is something that we've all kind of learned in this situation, is that it is really hard to sit on that screen. And I think we're just figuring that out collectively. So bringing it up and naming it is a really, kind of powerful way of advocating for that, so that your whole workday isn't spent that way. And then you can also come home and, maybe do something socially with the people that are close to you in your life too. I will also say, in terms of our Dungeons and Dragons, not so much for my brother, but for us, it's a lot easier because we're not really staring at the screen. I set my computer at the end of the table, and the 4 of us just kind of collect around the table. And so we're not straining as much, kind of being directly one on one with the screen. So some of that might just be how you set it up too, in terms of, if there's other people in your household that you can kind of share that with.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to move into the third area, which is physical well-being, and this really just comes down to eating, moving, and sleeping. So, eating, obviously, making good, positive dietary choices. And the piece that I always love to touch on with this is that when you have a meal that's high in saturated fat, it's not just that long-term impact, because we all kind of know that. We've been told by doctors and family members about that. We get that. But there's evidence that shows that that single meal that's high in saturated fat actually impacts, say it's at lunch, impacts our ability to perform the rest of the afternoon. And so knowing that, really being intentional with the things and the fuel that you're putting in your body that allow you to operate at that higher capacity. Now, this is absolutely something I'm still, working on because one of the easiest things for me to do when I'm stressed is to turn to those comfort foods. I'm from Nebraska originally. That's my home. I love, love, love my carbs and those super warm, cheesy, potatoy comfort foods. So, really challenging myself in this area, and I'm trying to really pay attention to this too. Certainly, the piece about moving, so exercising regularly. But the one I really want to touch on is this idea of completing a cycle. So, stress is a really interesting thing in our bodies. When we feel stressed as human beings, it's that classic fight or flight or freeze reaction that, we get whenever we're in danger. So stress is really that kind of fear-based chemical response. It pumps cortisol through our bodies. Our bodies don't differentiate between I'm stressed at work and I'm stressed by the giant bear that's chasing me. So when we're stressed, our body looks for that physical outlet. And when you feel yourself being stressed, doing something very vigorous for 15, 20 minutes is that kind of necessary outlet to push that out of our bodies. Our body's looking to complete the stress cycle. So as you're kind of going through the day, if you're feeling stressed, doing something vigorous in that moment, whether it's, some, I don't know, push-ups or jumping jacks or, going for a quick jog around the block, whatever it is, that is really necessary in terms of pushing the stress out of your body. And then last but not least, the idea of sleep. So um, our bodies really need that. And, Gallup studies have shown that really 7 to 8 hours is that sweet spot in terms of sleep. It helps our body perform at that optimal level. So interestingly, when we don't get enough sleep, it's it's almost as if, and I experienced this when my youngest was really, well, he didn't sleep for 6 months. He slept for about an hour at a time for the first 6 months of his life, and I have no memories really of that time. The first 6 months of his life are a complete blur for me, and so making sure that you're maintaining that, allowing your body to take the information and code it, just allows your body and your brain to really function at a higher level. So how do you do this? Leverage your lunch break. We all have these much shorter commutes now. Take the time to make something that's really healthy and is really good, that's going to fuel your body for the rest of the day. And then in the evening, if that's when you want to have that comfort food to kind of give into those temptations a little bit, that's a really good time because, um, you've at least empowered your body through the day. I'm all about balance. So move, some of the ideas that I've seen, and here's where if you have other ideas in terms of eating, moving, sleeping, absolutely please feel free to drop those in the chat box. Many brains are better than one. But I have a friend that does a nightly social dancing. So instead of dancing. But he records himself grooving to some of his favorite tunes and changes up his outfit every night. So it's something that we all look forward to, just knowing him and knowing him well. It's really fun to see him just kind of get into it. Fitness snacks, so not the snacks you put in your mouth, but stepping away from your desk every once in a while, doing some squats, some wall sits, some burpees if you're feeling really crazy, and then getting fit with friends. I have some friends that do virtual workouts together. One of them had spent some time as a trainer, and so he gets up at 6 a.m. and leads people in these virtual workouts together. So of course there's no cost to that either, which is amazing. And then there's a lot you can do in terms of sleep. So I just put a link in there to the Sleep Foundation in terms of practicing a really good sleep hygiene. But we talked about this before, but keeping your work separate from the place where you sleep and really keeping that place you sleep as a almost sacred space for that really helps your body kind of get in that rhythm, practicing the consistent bedtime, having a really strong routine, avoiding caffeine and alcohol close to bedtime. Those are all things that put your body in the right place to be able to sleep and really maximize that. So I'm going to touch just briefly on the financial well-being because it's one of the 5 areas, but I know it's also one of the trickiest right now for a lot of people. And certainly people are going through furloughs or job loss, layoffs, whatever the case may be. This can be a little bit of a tricky one. So it's absolutely necessary to have enough money to meet our basic needs. Like that is just critical. And without that, it's really difficult to have financial well-being. After that, it becomes more important that you have a security around your finances. So stable, secure finances. And how you manage and spend your money is kind of the gold standard in this area. And one of the interesting things, and I have this slide that I use in some of my presentations, but it's a little take on the Beatles song, Can't Buy Me Love. You can't do that. Well, you can buy financial well-being. And the interesting thing is that when we buy things, those things, get old, they wear down, they break, they just lose their luster. But when we buy experiences, so when we invest in doing things with other people, those are the things that really matter. And I know that's really hard right now because of our social distancing. But thinking about at some point we're going to come out of this. Thinking about ways that you can take, maybe money that you saved on not commuting, money that you saved on maybe not going out to eat as much, wherever you might find those little pieces of saving. Reward yourself by doing something really fun with people that you care about. And that could just be a really nice dinner somewhere in town. That could be, if you have the financial ability to do so, a little vacation somewhere. Really think about how you can invest in memories and experiences, because those don't fade or break or kind of lose their impact. So like I said, I really hesitate to give a lot of suggestions around the financial well-being because there are great financial people that are much smarter than me. I personally use Mint in terms of my financial tracking, and they had this really great resource in terms of getting through the coronavirus from a financial perspective. So I put that on there. I have no relationship with Mint other than I use them myself. So if you have other resources that are helpful for you, please feel free to use those. One small take on the purchase of experience that I mentioned before. This is actually a friend of mine, but he put this idea out there. So this is a way that you can buy an experience, and I hate to put in that selfish term because my friend wasn't thinking about that at all. He was thinking about how he could use where he's at and the kind of stability he has to be able to help somebody else. So he suggested that you go to a grocery store and buy a gift card, and then give that gift card through the cashier to somebody that might really benefit from that. So he was doing this in a completely altruistic sense, but he's also buying himself financial well-being in this way. Remember, buying experiences is something that lasts forever, and just knowing that he was able to help this one person, I know had a really good positive impact on him, and that's why he shared this on Facebook. So think about those creative ways that you can still maybe buy a little bit of experiences and help other people at the same time. Which leads us to the fifth and final dimension, which is community well-being. So again, the foundation is safety, clean air, water, and shelter. So being safe and secure in your community. But after that, getting involved, giving back is really where you start to get some of this community well-being. And there's this wonderful little turn of phrase that Gallup uses, that well-doing begets well-being. So doing things for others actually turns around and helps us too, gives us that strong sense of community well-being. So in terms of the how, think about the causes that you care about, different communities that you belong to, and how can you give your time, your talents, your treasure to be able to give something outside of yourself. Going back to the very beginning with that purpose well-being, Richard Leider talked about growing and giving. So how can you take what you've grown now and then share and give that with the people around you? So again, I'd love ideas and suggestions in terms of how you've seen this done in your own communities. Maybe something that you yourself have done, but how have you practiced community well-being? And so a few ideas. I live in the Como Park neighborhood of St. Paul in Minnesota. And these are some of the things that we've seen around our community. So you'll see at the very top the idea of kind of pooling resources to buy groceries for people that are in need. And there's somebody in our community that takes that and that we know and that we trust, and certainly is not just holding on to that, but is giving it forward to people that are truly in need. We saw this ask for this ER nurse in our community looking for a mask because she was hearing that people on her shifts were reusing them. And you'll see there's 17 comments, and you'll see her response kind of highlighted there. But she says, "Thank you to everyone who reached out. You have the best neighborhood. Thanks for all your kind words." I mean, there were dozens of people who offered to make masks for her and other healthcare professionals. And then we also had this neighborhood window walk. So somebody in our neighborhood decided, we've got a lot of folks in our community who are not able to go outside. Maybe they're immunocompromised. Maybe, they're on the elderly side, whatever the reason. Um, People will put signs in their windows. And then when people are out for walks with their dogs or their children, they'll actually take pictures and post them back in that thread on Facebook. So it's this really great give and take of not just people putting them up, but people seeing them and acknowledging them and then posting them back and saying how cool it was to see those. And there's some different themes around those. You'll see right around St. Patrick's Day is when it started, but it's still going on. So a really cool way of just involving everybody in our community. Now, I know that all of this in terms of taking care of your well-being might seem really self-centered. And so I wanted to kind of bring us to a close here with this idea. It's the analogy of the oxygen mask on an airplane. You have to put your mask on before you help somebody else. And there's really great science and data around this that comes from the Greater Good Center at Berkeley. But our well-being is contagious in our social circles. So taking care of ourselves actually helps the people around us. So think about that social well-being and how contagious that is. Our well-being also increases our bond with other people. So when we look out for ourselves and our own well-being, that also gives other people permission to do that and gives people ideas and hope and strategies for doing that as well. It actually can improve the health of the people around us. So it's not just taking care of ourselves and our own health. It does have that broader community impact. And ultimately, there's great evidence that it helps us tackle these large social problems in our communities and in the world as a whole. So it's really amazing the impact that this has. And it's not selfish or self-centered to really take care of your well-being, because it does have these positive impacts on the communities around us. The Greater Good Center at Berkeley, I mentioned, they have a ton of resources, especially for parents and for educators, just general coronavirus well-being resources. So if you're looking for additional things, know that there is just a wealth out there. And the Greater Good Center at Berkeley is certainly one of my personal favorites. I spent a lot of time on their site anyway, even before all this happened. So that said, to bring us home, I gave you a lot, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed with that. And so, what's one step that you might take even yet today, knowing that it's about 2:45 Central, so about 3:45. They're East Coast for any of you that are on the East Coast. But what's one thing that you could do today that would help either your purpose well-being, or your social well-being, or your physical, or your financial, or community well-being? So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed and think that you have to do everything. If you're feeling like you're maybe a 1 out of 10 on all 5 of those dimensions right now, I don't want you to think tomorrow you need to go 10 out of 10. That's not sustainable. But how can you take that 1 to a 2, or that 2 to a 3, or that 6 to a 7? How do you make that small incremental increase, and then over time keep pushing that number up so that your well-being can increase and you have a really good sustainable strategy, instead of trying to go all in, tomorrow. You'll also see at the bottom, I created a little kind of handout, and I'll pop the link into the chat here. And I'm terrible about typing at the same time that I'm talking, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I created that little handout. It's at the bit.ly/quarantine wellbeing. It just summarizes a lot of these concepts and strategies. So it's something that you can take with you in case, maybe you weren't taking notes, or you thought of something, or you caught part of something and didn't catch the whole thing. So just a little snippet. There's no sign in. There's no, you don't give me your name or email or anything. So don't feel like you're giving anything away, but it's totally there. It's just a nice little document that's sitting in my Google Drive that you can download. So that said, that is what I have for you today. And I appreciate all the participation in the chat and all the great ideas that you all shared. Like I said, many brains are better than just my one brain here in Minnesota. So I really appreciate it, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Chad. We'll give folks just a second to type in any questions they have before we wrap things up. Looks like people are chatting in what their first step will be here. So if you want to take a look at some of their examples.
Can we just speak up? Can we also just I can just speak up and ask a question, right?
Sure, sure, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, very good. Um, Chad, how do you, let me see, you did give us a lot of great information, so I just wanted to say thank you. And how, yeah, given this whole pandemic thing and given the fact that our entire lives are online, what are what are some different, and currently I'm overseas anyway, so it's, this isn't my usual routine. I'll be home in August, but still, uh you know uh, what sorts of suggestions do you have as far as, just because everything is online, but then how to have better work life balance? And
Mhm.
also, oh, by the way, you mentioned that wonderful friend of yours that does the 6 a.m. workout. I would love to get the website or whatever, because that sounds like fun.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately I can't share the website. He just has a private Zoom link that he shares with his friends. So it's not, it's not something he does professionally. So I'm sorry
Gotcha. Okay, no
I
problem.
can't connect you to that. Um, but no, I think if I could talk like really big strategies at this point, one of the things that our brains are really not good at is ambiguity. And one thing that our brains are really, really, really not good at is ambiguity over a long period of time. And that is where we are at 100% right now. And our brains thrive off certainty in the short term. And so this is part of why I bring it back to that strategy of what's one little thing that you can do today. And as much as some people really hate routine and structure, and predictability, especially at times of high stress, our bodies just crave that. We, our brains really just want to know, what can I expect tomorrow? Because when we start to think about what might be happening in August or September, and I'm a huge college football fan. Um, I didn't look ahead to the schedule. I'm not sure if Maryland's coming to Minnesota this year, but I try to go to the Maryland Minnesota game here when it's here in town. Um, I can't think about all that. That's so far away. I really have found that I need to focus on the short term. So that's overall strategy number one is, what can you think about in terms of tomorrow? Because none of us have any idea what, August or September might look like. And anybody that says they know, I think quite honestly, they're fooling themselves. I hate to be that blunt, but I don't think it's possible that anybody can know what, 2, 3 months from now is really going to look like. In terms of the work-life balance, this is such a hard thing. So many of us, and I'm certainly one of them. We have our kids at home now. We are working remote, and so you've got people that are full-time employees, full-time parents, and full-time teachers, and that's a lot of roles. And some people are throwing full-time caregivers on top of that. If they have someone in their life that they're caring for, and a lot of that means that we have to kind of find those rhythms and those patterns that work for us. And again, I really advocate that when we can keep work in a place physically in our house, that helps us separate mentally too. And so it's this idea of, I'm going to work now, even though it's in my own house, I'm going to this one special place. And I know people do like, variety when they work and everything, but the more that we can keep work in a place and to some degree a time, if our schedules allow that, again, knowing that all these different roles we have, that might not be possible. But how do we keep it in its one specific place? Is a really great strategy in terms of giving that balance.
Thanks, Chad. We had one more question come in from Lisa um, around socializing. I know you talked a lot about spending, it was maybe 5 or 6 hours socializing. Do you have advice for folks who may be more introverted or maybe shy, and the idea of 5 to 6 hours may sound a little overwhelming to them?
Yeah. I have to admit, I was really hoping I get this question because, so Lisa, I am on the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the strongest possible introvert that you can get. My score is 100% on the introvert side. So I feel this a lot. But I think when you think about those, 5 or 6 hours of daily social time in a workplace setting, we kind of get a lot of that naturally without thinking about it in terms of, just kind of the passing conversations in a hallway or the morning check-in, the face-to-face meetings. Um, but if you try to get, say, that 5 or 6 hours after the work day is done, that's going to be impossible. But thinking about, and especially for me, I know that I am much more a one-to-one person than I am a group person. If you put me in a group, the more people are in that room, the quieter I get. So for me, I really try to intentionally reach out to one or two of my friends. This goes back to the idea of diversifying your friendship portfolio. But each week I'll make a note that I want to try to reach out to these couple people and have, in my case, a phone conversation with them, because I want to try to get off Zoom from time to time, but really engage with them in that one-to-one way, and just have that kind of connection. And I think, Lisa, the other thing that I'll share, the positive silver lining in this whole situation is that this is an awkward time for all of us. we are all struggling. We are all, not always our best selves. And what that means is it's okay to be a little bit awkward. And so for me, I like to lean into my awkwardness in terms of reaching out to people, and just know that it's going to feel weird asking to maybe do, a virtual Dungeons and Dragons, for example. My brother is kind of like, what? But reaching out to people and just leaning into the awkwardness a little bit, can be really helpful. Just knowing that as introverts, we also do need that interaction. And I think one of the things I've noticed from a lot of my introverted friends is that we are realizing that we can't just survive on islands to ourselves. So, lean into the awkwardness and do, kind of create that structure and routine.
Great. Thank you so much. It looks like Lisa's grateful for your response too. Is there anything else you wanted to cover, Chad, before I wrap up?
That's a dangerous question. As we were talking at the outset, learner is one of my top 5, and I have this really bad habit of, I have way more content than I do time in most cases. So yeah, I will certainly field questions, but I hesitate to open another Pandora's box of information here.
Well, I encourage anyone who has further questions or wants to learn or swap ideas with Chad to reach out to him directly. I will be providing a copy and recording of this webinar along with the link that Chad shared, to your email address later on this afternoon or maybe tomorrow morning. I appreciate everyone tuning in, and a huge shout out to Chad for offering his expertise to us here. I hope everyone stays healthy and safe, and go Terps.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye,
You're the
to meet all
everyone.
turtle.
of you.
Thanks so
Shells
much.
United.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Go
Bye-bye.
Terps.